Family, whenever God is preparing to release something big into your life, He rarely sends an announcement. He doesn't drop a memo from heaven or give you a divine calendar invite. Instead, He moves in ways that seem ordinary until they aren't. He sets the stage, rearranges the scenery, and positions your heart so that when the blessing comes, you're not only ready, you're transformed. You see, God never gives a big blessing to an unprepared vessel. Before He enlarges your territory, He enlarges your faith. Before He opens a door, He strengthens your grip on the handle. And before He takes you where He's taking you, He shapes you into who you need to be once you get there. So how do you know when God is getting ready to do something extraordinary in your life? There are signs, divine fingerprints, that show up right before heaven's breakthrough reaches your doorstep. First, God often allows disruption. Not destruction, disruption. Things shift, routines break, comfort zones crack. What once worked no longer works. Why? Because you can't stay where you are and walk into what God has prepared. When the nest gets uncomfortable, it's usually because God is teaching you to fly. Second, He increases your spiritual sensitivity. Suddenly the scriptures feel louder. A sermon hits deeper. You sense God nudging you in ways you can't ignore anymore. It's not coincidence, it's preparation. God is tuning your heart so you can hear instructions for the next level. Third, He brings divine connections and sometimes divine separations. People enter your life who sharpen you, challenge you, push you, and sometimes people exit because they can't go where God is taking you. Every blessing has a weight limit, and not everyone can be carried with you. Fourth, your faith gets stretched. God will ask you to take steps that don't fully make sense yet. He will call you out of the boat before you see the waves calm. That's because big blessings require big trust, and trust is built in uncertainty. Fifth, God gives you a holy unrest, a stirring, a sense that something is coming, even if you can't articulate it. Your spirit starts packing bags before your mind understands the journey. That's God whispering, get ready. I'm about to move. But hear this, when these signs appear, don't run from them, lean into them, praise through them, because they are not signs of God's absence, they are signs of His nearness. They are the prelude to promotion, the breadcrumb trail of the miraculous, the countdown to a blessing bigger than anything you've imagined. And when that blessing arrives, you'll realize every disruption, every stretch, every shift was not just worth it, it was necessary. So hold on, stay faithful, stay expectant, because when God is about to bless you big, heaven always sends the signs first. Disruption is one of the clearest signals that God is preparing to release a greater blessing into your life, but it rarely feels that way in the moment. When everything familiar begins shifting, when routines stop satisfying, and when the ground beneath your feet no longer feels stable, it's natural to wonder if something has gone wrong. Yet in the spiritual realm, disruption is often the first step toward elevation. God uses disruption not to punish you, but to position you, not to diminish you, but to develop you for what's coming next. There are times when God must interrupt the rhythm of your life because you have become too comfortable where He never intended for you to settle. Comfort is not always wrong, but it can become a cage. It can make you cling to the predictable when God wants to lead you into the exceptional. So He begins to shake things, not to break you, but to wake you. He loosens your grip on routines that no longer serve your purpose. A job that once inspired you becomes draining. A relationship that once felt necessary becomes seasonal. An opportunity that once opened doors begins to close. These changes may feel like loss, but spiritually they are invitations. God is shifting your environment so He can shift your destiny. When God is preparing a major blessing, He often disrupts the areas of your life where you have settled for less than His intention. You may have prayed for change, but expected it to come in a neat, controlled package. Instead, God rearranges things in ways you didn't anticipate. You find yourself feeling restless, dissatisfied, or even frustrated. But that restlessness is often the seed of divine movement. It's God telling you there is more for you and you cannot remain here. Consider how an eagle stirs its nest. When eaglets grow strong enough to fly, the parent begins removing the soft padding from the nest, exposing the thorns beneath. Suddenly, the place that was once comfortable becomes uncomfortable. The eaglets are pushed to the edge, encouraged to spread their wings, to try what they were created for. The discomfort is not cruelty, it is preparation for their purpose. In the same way, God may remove the padding from areas of your life so you will stop clinging to what's familiar and begin embracing what's possible. Disruption also exposes what you've been depending on. Sometimes you don't realize how deeply you've relied on your own strength, a certain pattern, or a particular person until that thing is shaken. God often allows disruption to reorient your trust. He pulls you away from false anchors and redirects your dependence toward Him. When resources shift, when plans don't go as expected, when doors you thought were secure begin closing, God isn't abandoning you. He's reminding you that He is the source, not the situation. And when your reliance returns to Him, you're finally ready for blessings that require a stronger foundation. Another aspect of divine disruption is timing. God's disruption doesn't always align with your schedule. It can come at inconvenient moments, challenging moments, or moments when you feel least prepared. But God's timing is always strategic. He sees the path ahead in ways you can't. He knows the opportunities forming behind the scenes, the breakthroughs aligning in ways you can't yet perceive. The disruption you experience today may be the very thing that keeps you from missing tomorrow's blessing. When God disrupts your life, He is not tearing something down without purpose. He is clearing space for something greater. Disruption is divine construction in disguise. It's the process God uses to lift you out of what's limiting you and guide you toward what's waiting for you. Even though it may feel overwhelming, unsettling, or confusing, disruption is often the whisper of heaven saying, prepare yourself. I'm getting ready to bless you far beyond what you expected. When God is preparing to bring a major blessing into your life, one of the clearest signs is that your spiritual sensitivity begins to deepen. You start noticing things you once ignored. You hear God's whispers in places you previously rushed through. Scripture that felt familiar suddenly carries new weight, new revelation, new urgency. It isn't that God is speaking more than before. It's that your spirit has become more tuned to His frequency. Heaven hasn't grown louder. Your heart has grown more attentive. This heightened sensitivity often begins quietly. You may find yourself waking up with a verse stirring in your mind or sensing a nudge to pray at unexpected times. Moments that used to feel ordinary begin to feel purposeful. You might hear a sermon or a song and feel as though it was crafted directly for your situation. What's really happening is that God is sharpening your discernment so you can recognize the doorway He is about to open. Blessings require direction, and direction requires hearing. So before God releases the blessing, He fine-tunes your ability to hear Him clearly. Spiritual sensitivity also changes the way you perceive your surroundings. You begin noticing patterns, behaviors, and opportunities through spiritual eyes rather than natural ones. Things that once felt random start revealing meaning. You become more aware of God's movement in your day-to-day experiences. A conversation that would have once seemed casual now feels like divine alignment. An obstacle that might have frustrated you suddenly becomes a teaching moment. This shift in awareness is intentional. God is making sure that when the blessing comes, you recognize it as His work, not luck, not coincidence, not chance. Another part of increased sensitivity is conviction. When God prepares to elevate you, He tightens your spiritual boundaries. You become more aware of thoughts, habits, or choices that once slipped by unnoticed. It's not about guilt, it's about preparation. God cannot pour a greater blessing into a heart that refuses to be purified. So he begins highlighting areas where growth is needed. You may feel internal nudges, gentle but persistent, calling you to deeper integrity, deeper prayer, deeper obedience. This strengthening of your inner life is a sign that God trusts you with more, and he is getting you ready to carry it without collapse. This sensitivity often grows strongest in seasons of silence. When God is about to move significantly, he sometimes reduces the noise around you. Friend groups shift. Social appetite changes. Distractions lose their pull. You may find yourself craving solitude, not because you're withdrawing, but because your spirit is listening. Silence becomes sacred, not empty. In that sacred silence, you hear God more clearly. His guidance, his warnings, his promises. What feels like aloneness is often divine intimacy. God is drawing you closer so you will not miss what he's preparing to reveal. Increased spiritual sensitivity also affects your desires. You begin wanting what aligns with God's heart rather than what merely satisfies your emotions. Things that used to excite you lose their appeal. You feel drawn to what builds you, not what entertains you. You long for clarity, wisdom, and spiritual growth. Your prayers shift from God, bless me, to God, shape me. When God sees that your desires are maturing, he knows you're ready for blessings that require stewardship, not just celebration. This sensitivity isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it means you can no longer tolerate environments, conversations, or behaviors that you once overlooked. Even subtle negativity or compromise feels heavier than before. It's not hypersensitivity, it's spiritual refinement. God is removing dullness from your discernment so that you can see clearly what leads you toward him and what pulls you away. Ultimately, increased spiritual sensitivity is God aligning your inner ear with his voice. He wants you positioned to hear his instructions the moment he gives them. A big blessing doesn't just require faith, it requires direction. Where to step, when to step, and how to step. So before God releases the blessing, he sharpens your ability to hear him, recognize him, and follow him. That sharpening is the sign that something significant is approaching. It's the quiet before the breakthrough, the tuning before the song, the preparation before the promise. When God is preparing to bring a significant blessing into your life, one of the most noticeable signs is the shifting of relationships. Both the arrival of new, purposeful connections and the departure of those whose season in your life has ended. These relational changes are not random. They are deliberate movements orchestrated by God to position you for what he's preparing to release. Blessings often require the right people around you, and just as often, they require the absence of the wrong ones. When God brings divine connections, they rarely enter quietly. They show up with clarity, conviction, and confirmation. These are people who speak to your purpose, challenge your growth, and push you toward what God has placed inside you. They aren't intimidated by your calling, nor do they discourage your development. Instead, they recognize something in you that aligns with something in them. They carry wisdom, support, accountability, and insight that fit where you're going, not merely where you've been. These divine connections have a way of igniting dormant gifts, encouraging steps of faith, and helping you see possibilities you may have overlooked. God uses them as vessels to strengthen you for the blessing ahead. On the other side, divine separations can feel painful, confusing, or even abrupt, but they are just as necessary. There are people who walk with you in one season who cannot walk with you into the next. Their role was tied to your past, not your future. And while their exit may feel like loss, spiritually it is often protection. Sometimes God removes people because their influence would interfere with the blessing he intends to give you. Other times, he separates you because their mindset, habits, or spiritual posture would hinder your growth. You cannot carry everyone with you into a new chapter, especially when some were only meant to be part of the introduction. Divine separations do not always come through conflict. They may come through distance, changes in priorities, differences in direction, or natural drifting. God doesn't always use storms to separate you. Sometimes he uses silence. A connection that once felt essential may suddenly feel unnecessary. Conversations that once flowed easily feel strained. Values that once aligned now diverge. When these shifts occur, they are not always signs that something is wrong. Often they are signs that something is finishing. And God will not allow you to cling to relationships that would compromise the blessing he is preparing. It's important to recognize that divine connections and divine separations work together. God adds where you need strength and removes where you need freedom. He positions the right encouragers around you while distancing the voices that sow doubt or distraction. He aligns you with people who multiply your faith and distances you from those who drain. Before every major blessing in Scripture, God rearranged someone's relational circle. Abraham had to leave his country and relatives. David was separated from Saul. Joseph was taken away from his brothers. Ruth was separated from her homeland and connected to Naomi. In each case, the blessing came after the shift. Sometimes these relational changes expose your attachments. You may not realize how dependent you become on certain people until God prunes that connection. The pruning isn't meant to punish. It's meant to clarify your identity and strengthen your trust in him alone. God never allows a separation without purpose. What feels like subtraction is often the clearing of space for divine addition. As God prepares you for a big blessing, he surrounds you with people who edify your spirit, challenge your character, and support your assignment. He removes those who would hinder your progress, distract your focus, or dilute your purpose. These movements are divine choreography. God rearranging the cast of your life to ensure that the next act unfolds exactly as he intends. When you begin to see these relational shifts, recognize them for what they are, signs that God is aligning everything and everyone for the blessing that is on its way. When God is preparing to bring a major blessing into your life, one unmistakable sign is that your faith begins to stretch in ways you didn't anticipate. You find yourself standing in places where certainty is limited, clarity feels distant, and the next step seems bigger than what you feel capable of taking. This stretching is not punishment, it is preparation. God will not place a significant blessing into hands that have never learned to trust him beyond their comfort. Stretching seasons enlarge your spiritual capacity so you can carry what God is about to release. Faith stretching often begins subtly. God nudges you toward R&D decisions that require more trust than logic. You feel the pull to apply for something you don't feel fully qualified for, to pursue a dream that intimidates you, or to obey an instruction that doesn't yet make complete sense. These aren't random impulses, they are divine invitations. God is calling you to walk in a faith that is deeper than convenience and stronger than fear. Every major blessing has a weight to it, and faith is the backbone that allows you to stand under that weight without bending. When God stretches your faith, he often places you in situations where you cannot rely on your usual strengths or resources. The things you used to depend on don't work the way they once did. Plans you could normally predict become unpredictable. The path you used to navigate easily becomes foggy. These transitions force you to shift your trust from your own abilities to God's sufficiency. They reveal that faith is not merely believing God can do something, it is trusting him even when you cannot trace him. Stretching seasons expose where your faith has been shallow and deepen the roots of your dependence on him. Part of faith stretching includes moments where God asks you to move before the miracle materializes. He asks you to build before you see rain, to step before you see the path, to speak before you see results. This is where faith becomes action. God will test your willingness to move based on his word rather than your sight. The blessing you're waiting for is often hanging on the other side of obedience that feels uncomfortable. God asks you to do what seems small or strange so he can reveal what is supernatural. Sometimes the most powerful breakthroughs come after the smallest acts of obedience. Stretching also exposes areas of fear that have been hiding in your heart. When God pushes you towards something greater, fear naturally rises, not because you are weak, but because you are stepping into territory that surpasses your past experiences. Fear is not a sign that you lack faith. It is a sign that faith is being demanded at a higher level. God uses stretching to confront those fears head on so they no longer limit you. He allows you to face what intimidates you so you can learn that His presence is bigger than your anxiety and His purpose is stronger than your hesitation. Another aspect of faith stretching is endurance. God sometimes allows delay to strengthen your resilience. You may pray for something and not see the answer immediately. The waiting becomes part of the stretching. It teaches you to hold on to promises without letting circumstances dictate your hope. Waiting seasons are weightlifting seasons. Every day you hold on is another day your faith gains strength. God stretches your endurance, so when the blessing comes, you won't crumble under the pressure of sustaining it. Even in uncertainty, stretching seasons carry subtle confirmations from God. He sends small signs, gentle reminders, and quiet assurances that you're on the right path. These are the breadcrumbs of grace that keep you moving forward. The stretching may feel uncomfortable, but it is strategic. God stretches your faith so your blessing will not exceed your capacity. He expands your trust so your future blessing won't overwhelm you. Every challenge, every step into the unknown, every moment you choose faith over fear is preparing you for what God has already set in motion. So when your faith is being stretched, don't assume something is wrong. Often it's the clearest evidence that something big is on the way. One of the most powerful signs that God is preparing to bring a major blessing into your life is the presence of a holy unrest, a deep inner stirring that you can't quite explain. It's not anxiety and it's not worry. It's a spiritual vibration, a sense that something is shifting beneath the surface even if nothing external has changed yet. This unrest is God awakening your spirit to the reality that He is moving, aligning, preparing, and orchestrating something on your behalf. It is heaven's way of nudging your soul forward before your circumstances catch up. Holy unrest often begins with a subtle dissatisfaction, not with God, but with your current level of living, thinking, or being. You may start feeling uncomfortable with patterns you once tolerated. You sense there is more inside you, more available to you, more God is calling you into. You can't settle the way you used to. What once felt acceptable now feels too small. This isn't because something is wrong, it's because something is coming. God is loosening your attachment to the old so you will be ready to embrace the new. This inner stirring can feel like an unexplainable sense of expectation. You don't know what's about to happen, but you sense that something is on the horizon. You may find yourself thinking differently, dreaming differently, or praying differently. Your heart feels alert, your spirit feels tuned, and your mind starts imagining things you never had the courage to consider before. This expectation is not random. When God prepares a blessing, He often prepares your appetite for it first. He expands your vision. So when the blessing comes, you'll recognize it instead of resisting it. Another aspect of holy unrest is the feeling that you're outgrowing certain mindsets. Thoughts that once limited you now feel too restrictive. Doubts that once dominated you start losing their grip. You begin questioning lies you once believed about yourself. This inner movement is the Holy Spirit elevating your self-awareness so you can begin to think at the level God is preparing to bless. God will not place a large blessing in a mind that insists on thinking small. So He stirs your self-perception until you begin to see yourself through His perspective instead of your past. Holy unrest can also create a desire for change that you can't explain logically. You may feel a pull toward a new environment, a new opportunity, or a new direction. You may not have all the details, but you feel prompted to prepare. Like something inside you is packing bags, even though your body hasn't moved yet. This preparation isn't emotional, it's spiritual. It's God training your inner world for the shift your outer world is about to experience. You might also feel an unusual boldness rising in you. Normally, stepping out in faith would intimidate you, but suddenly you feel strengthened to do what once felt impossible. Your prayers become bolder, your declarations become stronger, and your willingness to trust God deepens. This courage doesn't come from your personality, it comes from God himself. He infuses you with confidence because he knows what's approaching, and he wants you to be ready to receive it without hesitation. Sometimes holy unrest shows up as a sensitivity to God's timing. You sense that the season you're in is temporary. You can feel it wrapping up even if nothing looks different yet. God often speaks through that internal awareness before the external shift arrives. The stirring becomes your compass, guiding you even when details are unclear. Another dimension of holy unrest is that it draws you closer to God. Instead of pulling away, you find yourself praying more, worshiping more, listening more. You crave his presence with an intensity you haven't felt in a long time. This is because God is aligning your heart with his will. He wants you close enough to hear his instructions when the blessing arrives. Even though holy unrest can feel uncomfortable, it is never destructive. It is purposeful, directional, and prophetic. It is God whispering, prepare yourself. Something is about to break open. It is heaven's alert that a shift is already unfolding. And when you feel that stirring, you can trust that God is not only moving, he is moving in your favor.